The Winchester 73 rifle's octagonal barrel pressed cold against his shoulder as Jack Redwood held his breath, index finger hovering just outside the trigger guard, ready but disciplined. Through the cracked glass of his cabin window, he watched a figure stumble across his property line, a woman in a torn blue dress that caught the dying light like scattered prayers. She shouldn't be here. A gunshot cracked in the distance. Jack's muscles tensed as he steadied the rifle. The woman flinched but kept moving toward his cabin with renewed urgency. No one came to the Redwood place anymore, not since Emily died 3 winters back. The townsfolk whispered that grief had turned him strange, that he talked to shadows and kept his wife's grave closer than scripture. Let them whisper. The isolation suited him fine. But this woman, she moved wrong. Too careful, like someone running from more than weather. Her bare feet found every quiet spot between the loose boards of his porch, avoiding the creaks that would announce her presence to anyone listening. Professional quiet, the kind that came from practice or fear. Jack shifted his weight, and the floorboard beneath him groaned. The woman froze mid-step, one hand pressed against his front door, the other clutching something small and dark against her chest. Even through the glass, he could see her shoulders shaking, not from cold, but from exhaustion that ran deeper than bone. "Don't move," he called out, voice rougher than he intended. 3 years of talking only to himself had left him unpracticed with company. The woman's head turned toward his voice, and moonlight caught her face. Young, maybe 25 at most. But her eyes held the kind of hollow weight that aged a person beyond counting. Blood streaked her temple, and her dress hung in tatters that spoke of violence, of running through thorns, and worse. She should have bolted back into the darkness like a spooked deer. Instead, she pressed her palm flat against his door and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper, words that hit him like a fist to the chest. "Jack," she said, and it was Emily's voice. Emily's exact inflection, the way she used to call his name when thunder shook the house and she needed comfort. "Please." The Winchester's walnut stock slipped in his grip. His dead wife's name hung in the air between them like smoke, impossible and undeniable. The woman's lips moved again, forming words he couldn't hear through the glass, but he didn't need to. He knew that mouth, the shape of it forming his name. 3 years dead, and Emily was standing on his porch. Jack stumbled backward from the window, rifle clattering against the wall. His hands shook as he pressed them against his ears, trying to block out the impossible. The woman, Emily, whoever she was, tapped against the door again, soft and patient. "I know you're there," came that familiar voice, muffled by wood but unmistakable. "I know you can hear me." He dreamed this moment 1,000 times. Emily returning to him, whole and warm and laughing at his tears. But dreams didn't bleed. Dreams didn't wear torn dresses or carry the scent of fear and gunpowder. Jack forced himself to think past the thundering in his chest. The woman knew his name, knew Emily's voice, but she was flesh and bone. He could see her breath fogging in the cold air. Someone had sent her, someone who knew about Emily, about the way she used to speak his name in the dark. Sheriff Miller, maybe. The man had been sniffing around for months, asking questions about Jack's state of mind, about whether a man so lost in grief might be dangerous to himself or others. Or maybe it was Dr. Reynolds from town, the one who kept suggesting Jack needed help with his mourning. "I can prove it's me," the woman said, and her voice cracked with exhaustion. "The scar on your shoulder from when you fell from your horse into Carson's Creek. You told me it looked like a crescent moon." Jack's hand moved involuntarily to his left shoulder, where the old wound lay hidden beneath his shirt. He'd never told anyone about that scar except, "And the night before I died," she continued, voice growing stronger. "I told you I was carrying our baby. I was going to tell you at breakfast, but the fever came too fast." The words hit him like hollow point bullets, expanding through his chest. Emily had died in her sleep, sudden and silent. The doctor said a fever that took her in the night while Jack slept beside her, oblivious. She'd never mentioned a baby, never had the chance, unless she had tried to tell him, and he'd been too deep in sleep to hear. Jack approached the door on unsteady legs. Through the frosted glass, he could see her silhouette, small and waiting. If this was Emily, somehow impossibly returned, then she needed him. If it wasn't, at the edge of his property, Jack caught movement in the shadows. Horses, maybe 3 or 4, standing just beyond the tree line, waiting. The glint of metal, a rifle barrel catching moonlight. The first shot shattered his kitchen window. Jack dove sideways as glass rained down, pulling the woman, Emily, with him as she tumbled through the door. She landed against his chest, solid and warm and trembling, her dark hair smelling of rain and terror. "They followed me," she gasped against his shoulder. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't know where else to go." Another shot punched through the wall above their heads, showering them with splinters. Jack rolled, putting his body between her and the door, and grabbed his Winchester from where it had fallen. Outside, he could hear boots hitting the ground, men's voices calling orders in the darkness. "How many?" he whispered, checking the rifle's action with practiced hands. "5. Her hand gripped his arm with desperate strength. "Blackwell's gang. They've been chasing me for 2 days." "Who are they?" The woman's face, because it was her face he was certain now, every beloved detail exactly as he remembered, twisted with something between fear and shame. The Blackwell gang. She pressed the small, dark object she'd been clutching into his palm. A leather pouch, heavy with coins. Blood money. From what I could tell, 20 families' life savings. They robbed the bank in redemption, killed 5 people, including a marshal. I couldn't let them get away with it. Jack weighed the pouch in his hand, the heft of blood and broken dreams. "You got a name?" he asked, his voice hard as he chambered a round in the Winchester. "You know my name," she whispered, but something in his expression made her falter. "Don't you?" "I know you're not my wife," Jack said, his voice flat. "Emily's dead 3 years, so I'll ask again. Who are you?" Before she could answer, a voice bellowed from outside. "We know she's in there, mister. Send her out with our property, and we'll let you live." Jack met the woman's eyes. Whether she was ghost or stranger or miracle, she was here, and she was his to protect. He'd failed to save his wife once. He wouldn't fail again. "The root cellar," he said, hauling her to her feet. "There's a tunnel that goes out past the barn." But as they stumbled toward the kitchen, flames began licking at the window frames, and the sound of breaking wood told him the Blackwell gang wasn't planning to wait for morning. Through the broken window, Jack could see muzzle flashes in the darkness, hear the Blackwell boys shouting over the storm. "Burn him out," someone called. "Torch the whole place." "No," came another voice, harder and colder. "The girl first, then we burn what's left." In the root cellar's musty darkness, Jack lit a stub of candle and watched the woman's face flicker in the yellow glow. She sat on a crate of preserves, pressing a torn piece of her dress against the cut on her temple. For a moment, she looked exactly like his wife had the morning after their wedding, soft and tired and achingly beautiful. "I'm not her," the woman said quietly, reading his expression. "I know that's what you're thinking, but I'm not your wife." Jack nodded, throat too tight for words. Above them, boots stomped across his floor, and he could hear furniture being overturned. The Blackwell boys were searching, methodical, and patient. "My name is Abigail Fleming," she continued. I am, Emily's sister." The words hit him like a physical blow. Emily had mentioned a sister once, years ago, a girl who'd run away from home when they were children, vanished into the territories. Emily had cried the night she told him, mourning a sister she thought was dead. She talked about you, Abigail whispered, in her letters, the ones I never answered because I was too proud, too angry at the world to forgive her for staying while I ran. She pulled something from her pocket, a small silver locket, tarnished with age. Jack recognized it instantly. He'd given it to Emily on their wedding day. I came back to visit her grave, Abigail said, opening the locket to reveal a tiny photograph of Emily's face, smiling. 3 years too late to say goodbye. Jack took the locket, rubbing his thumb over Emily's face before handing it back. He turned to his supplies, methodically checking the load on his Colt single-action Army revolver, the 1873 model with the 7.5-inch barrel. 645 caliber rounds, each one capable of stopping a charging bull or a desperate man. "How'd you know to use her voice?" Jack asked, spinning the cylinder to check each chamber. A small, sad smile crossed Abigail's face. "We used to pretend to be each other when we were girls. Fooled our own father sometimes. Emily was always better at it than me, but," she shrugged, "I remembered how she spoke your name in her letters, like it was something precious." Jack nodded, then gestured to the knife tucked into her boot, a bone-handled blade he'd glimpsed earlier when she'd nearly stumbled. "You're not just a woman running from trouble, are you?" Abigail's eyes hardened. She pulled the knife, a well-worn Arkansas toothpick with an 8-inch blade, and twirled it expertly between her fingers. "I've been making my living as a bounty hunter for 8 years," she said. "Started tracking deserters after the war, then moved on to bigger game. I was in Redemption looking for a horse thief when the Blackwells came through." She tilted her head, listening to the sounds above. "Silas Blackwell used to ride with the regular army before he turned outlaw. He's smart, Jack. Smarter than most men I've hunted." "Smart men bleed just the same," Jack muttered, reaching for a canvas bag on a nearby shelf. From it, he pulled several small bundles of dynamite, fuses already trimmed and ready. "My daddy was a miner before he turned to ranching," he explained, seeing Abigail's raised eyebrow. "Taught me the value of keeping a few sticks handy. The tunnel comes out behind the old oak, but Blackwell's men will have that watched by now." Jack laid his weapons on an old wooden table, the Winchester, his Colt, a heavy hunting knife with a stag handle, and the dynamite. Next to them, he placed a box of matches and several lengths of thin wire. "There's a trick to setting traps," Jack said, his voice dropping into the rhythm of a man who'd spent years alone with his thoughts. "You don't place them where a man will step. You place them where he'll look." As he worked, fashioning simple pressure triggers from scraps of metal and wood, Abigail watched his hands with quiet respect. "Emily's letters said you were a scout during the war," she said. "Said you could track a ghost across bare rock if you had to." Jack's hands stilled for just a moment. "Second Texas Mounted Rifles. Spent most of '63 hunting Comancheros along the border. That was a long time ago." A sound from above, closer this time, made them both freeze. The creak of the kitchen floorboard directly above the root cellar door. Jack met Abigail's eyes and placed a finger to his lips. The root cellar door was hidden beneath an old rug in a heavy sideboard, but a thorough search would find it eventually. They needed to move. Jack pointed to the far corner of the cellar, where a narrow opening led into blackness. The escape tunnel, barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. As they gathered their weapons, preparing to slip away, the floorboard above creaked again. Then a new sound, the scrape of furniture being moved. They'd found the door. Abigail moved first, drawing her knife and positioning herself beside the entrance to the cellar. Jack took up position behind a stack of crates, Winchester raised and ready. When the door swung open, a shaft of lantern light cut into the darkness. A man's silhouette appeared at the top of the stairs, tall and lean, a pistol held carelessly in one hand. "Well now," the man drawled, his voice carrying the hint of a southern accent. "What sort of rat hole have we discovered here?" The man took one step down, then another, his attention fixed on the supplies stored along the walls, missing the deadly stillness that waited in the shadows. As he reached the bottom step, Abigail moved, a flash of steel in the dim light. The knife buried itself in the man's thigh. He screamed, stumbling forward, and Jack rose from his position, bringing the butt of his rifle down hard against the intruder's skull. The man crumpled without another sound. "Cooper," Abigail whispered, retrieving her knife and wiping it clean on the unconscious man's jacket. "Silas's tracker. Used to work for the Pinkertons before he took to robbing stages. The others won't be far behind." Jack quickly bound and gagged the man, then nodded toward the tunnel. "Time to disappear," he said grimly. The tunnel was an ordeal of cramped darkness and clinging mud, built decades earlier when Comanche raids had been a constant threat. It felt like being buried alive, but Jack pushed forward, one elbow at a time, the taste of dirt heavy in his mouth. Behind him, Abigail followed in grim silence, carrying most of their supplies in a canvas sack tied to her ankle. After what seemed like hours, Jack felt fresh air on his face. The tunnel's exit was hidden beneath the roots of the great oak tree that stood 100 yards behind his barn. Carefully, he pushed aside the covering of branches and earth, peering out into the stormy night. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle, and in flashes of lightning, he could see his property laid out before him. The barn with its roof half collapsed from neglect, the paddock where no horses had grazed for years, in his cabin, flames now visible through the windows. "They're burning it," Abigail whispered beside him, her breath warm against his ear. Jack nodded, throat tight. The cabin had been his and Emily's dream, built with his own hands. Now it was becoming another ghost. "I count 4 of them," he said after a moment of careful observation. "2 by the front porch, 1 circling the barn. The 4th must be the leader. He's standing back, watching." Abigail peered through the darkness. "The tall one by the big pine. That's Silas. The kid with him is Billy, barely old enough to shave. The big man on the porch is Jefferson. Wade must be the one checking the barn." "You know them well," Jack said, not a question but an observation. Abigail's face hardened in the dim light. "Silas and I were close once, before I knew what he really was, before the children and redemption." She turned to face Jack, her expression resolute. "I can draw them out. Get their attention while you circle behind." Jack shook his head. "No, we're outgunned and outnumbered." "But not outmatched," Abigail countered. "I've been hunting men like this for years, and Emily said you were the best scout in the regiment. We have the dark and the storm. We have surprise." Jack studied her for a long moment, seeing Emily's determination in the set of her jaw. It was a fool's plan, but they had few options. The nearest help was 10 miles away in Silver Creek, and the Blackwells would hunt them down long before they reached it. "Not like this," he said finally. "We do it smart. We set the traps first." For the next hour, they worked in the shadows, laying their ambush. Jack set tripwires among the trees, attaching them to the small bundles of dynamite. Not enough to kill, but enough to disorient, to frighten, to make hardened men hesitate. "Wire the detonator like this," he demonstrated to Abigail, showing her how to tie off the primer cord. "If they step on it, they'll lose a foot. If they see it and try to cut it, the tension release will trigger the second charge." Abigail, meanwhile, climbed the tallest pine at the edge of the property, establishing a sniper's position with a clear view of the cabin and surrounding area. Her rifle, a Spencer she'd retrieved from a hidden cache in her saddlebags, gleamed dully in the intermittent moonlight. "7 shots before I need to reload," she explained, "and I don't miss at this range." As dawn approached, they were ready. The cabin still burned, but slower now, the main structure still standing despite the Blackwells' efforts. The outlaws had made camp near Jack's front gate, confident in their numbers in the isolation of the property. "Remember," Jack whispered to Abigail as they finalized their plan, "the boy, Billy, we take him alive if we can. Sometimes a man deserves a second chance." Abigail's expression was unreadable as she nodded. Then she disappeared into the trees, climbing back to her position. Jack circled wide around the property, placing himself behind the Blackwells' camp. In the gray light of early dawn, he could make out 4 bedrolls arranged around a small sheltered fire. 2 men slept while 2 kept watch. Silas Blackwell himself and the large man called Jefferson. Jack settled into position behind a fallen log, checked his Winchester one final time, and waited. Patience had been his greatest asset as a scout. Now it would determine whether he and Abigail lived or died. The first explosion came just as the eastern sky began to lighten. One of Jack's traps, triggered by Wade as the man made his morning rounds. The blast wasn't large, but in the quiet dawn, it sounded like the end of the world. Chaos erupted in the camp. Men scrambled for weapons, shouting in confusion. Silas alone remained calm, barking orders and organizing his men. The second explosion followed moments later. Another trap, and this one closer to the camp. Then Abigail's rifle cracked from the treetops, and Cooper, who had apparently escaped his bonds in the root cellar, screamed and fell, clutching his shoulder. Jack waited until the Blackwells were fully distracted, firing toward Abigail's position, before he made his move. He lit the fuse on his largest bundle of dynamite and tossed it directly into the center of their camp. "Fire in the hole!" he bellowed, then ducked behind his cover. The blast threw dirt and debris 50 feet into the air. When Jack raised his head, 2 of the Blackwells lay motionless on the ground. Wade and Jefferson, either dead or badly wounded. Silas and the boy, Billy, had somehow escaped the worst of the blast and were now returning fire, shooting toward Jack's position. A bullet splintered the log inches from Jack's head, sending wood splinters into his cheek. He rolled left, came up on one knee, and fired 3 rapid shots. Billy yelped and dove for cover, but Silas stood his ground, a revolver in each hand, firing methodically. "I know you, Redwood," the outlaw leader called. "Army scout turned hermit, the man who let his wife die alone while he slept beside her." The words struck deeper than any bullet could have. Jack's next shot went wide, his hands suddenly unsteady. "Did Abigail tell you about us?" Silas continued, advancing step by step. "How she rode with my gang for a year. How she helped plan the Denver bank job. 6 men died that day, Redwood. Ask her how many she shot herself." Jack felt his world tilt. He glanced toward Abigail's position in the tree, but couldn't see her. "She's got silver on her tongue and ice in her heart," Silas shouted, close enough now that Jack could see the cruel smile on his face. "Just like in Denver, just like in Santa Fe, she finds some poor fool to trust her, then she—" A shot rang out from the treetops, cutting off Silas's words. The bullet kicked up dirt at his feet, forcing him to dive for cover. "Next one goes through your lying mouth, Silas." Abigail's voice carried clearly in the morning air. Jack seized the moment to move positions, circling to flank the remaining outlaws. As he crept forward, he caught sight of Billy, the youngest Blackwell, trying to escape through the trees. The boy couldn't have been more than 19, his face pale with fear. "Drop it, son," Jack called, his Winchester trained on the boy's chest. "Live to see another day." Billy froze, then slowly lowered his pistol to the ground. "Don't kill me, mister. I never shot nobody. I just keep watch, that's all." "On your knees, hands behind your head," Jack ordered, approaching cautiously. As the boy complied, another shot echoed across the property. Abigail's rifle again. A scream followed, then silence. "Jack!" Abigail's voice called out. "Silas is down, but Wade's still moving." Jack quickly secured Billy with a length of rope, then moved toward where he'd last seen the other outlaws. Wade was indeed still alive, crawling toward a dropped revolver despite a shattered leg. Jack kicked the weapon away, then brought the butt of his Winchester down on the back of the man's head. "That's for my cabin," he muttered as Wade slumped unconscious. Across the clearing, Silas Blackwell lay on his back, staring at the lightening sky. Blood spread across his chest from a wound that bubbled with each labored breath. As Jack approached, the outlaw's eyes found his. "She'll betray you too," Silas whispered, blood flecking his lips. "It's what she does." "She's Emily's sister," Jack replied simply. "That's all I need to know." A wet, gurgling laugh escaped Silas's throat. "Sisters," he managed. "You should ask her. About the bank. About how she was riding with us. When we hit Silver Creek First National. Last year." Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. "Silver Creek?" he repeated. "That's where your friend, the marshal, died," Silas finished, a bloody smile stretching his lips. "Tom Wilkes, your old war buddy. She knew him too. Knew he was your friend." Before Jack could question him further, Silas's eyes glazed over. The outlaw's final breath rattled out, and he was gone. Abigail appeared at Jack's side, her rifle held loosely in one hand. Her face was streaked with soot and dirt, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. "It's over," she said quietly. Jack looked at her, really looked at her. The resemblance to Emily was there, undeniable. But now he could see the differences too. The harder set to her jaw, the calluses on her trigger finger, the way her eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. "Was Silas telling the truth?" Jack asked, his voice dangerously calm. "About Silver Creek? About Tom?" Abigail's eyes widened, then fell. Her shoulders sagged as if the weight of all her years had suddenly fallen on them. "Not how he made it sound," she said quietly. "Yes, I rode with them. I was trying to bring them down from the inside. Tom knew. We were working together." Jack felt the anger rising in him, hot and bitter. "Tom Wilkes was like a brother to me. He died with a bullet in his back. I didn't know they were going to hit the bank that day," Abigail said, her voice breaking. "I tried to warn him, but I was too late. I've been hunting them ever since, trying to make it right." Jack nodded, looking around at the aftermath of their desperate fight. Two dead, two unconscious, one trussed up like a Thanksgiving turkey. And his cabin, still standing but badly damaged, smoke rising from its roof into the morning sky. "We should get these three to Silver Creek," he said after a moment, his voice betraying nothing of the storm inside him. "Sheriff Davis will want to sort this out." As they secured the surviving outlaws to their own horses, the eastern sky bloomed with color, reds and golds painting the clouds. A new day, whether they wanted it or not. Sheriff Davis and his deputies arrived 4 hours later, drawn by the distant explosions and gunfire. They found Jack and Abigail sitting on the front porch of the damaged cabin, the captured Blackwells secured to the hitching post, and the bodies of Silas and Jefferson laid out respectfully under canvas. "Heard the Blackwell gang hit Redemption," Davis said as he dismounted. His eyes moved from Jack to Abigail, noting the resemblance to the woman in the small portrait that had sat on Jack's mantle for years. "Didn't expect to find them here." "They followed me," Abigail explained, handing over the leather pouch of stolen money. "This belongs to the people of Redemption." Davis weighed the pouch in his hand. "There's a reward," he said. $200 for Silas Blackwell alone." Abigail shook her head. "Send it to the families of the victims. They need it more than I do." The sheriff's eyebrows rose, but he nodded in respect. "I'll need statements from both of you, and these three will stand trial in Redemption." As the deputies loaded the prisoners and bodies onto wagons, Davis pulled Jack aside. "Heard you've been keeping to yourself these past years," the sheriff said quietly. "Folks in town been worried." Jack's eyes drifted to where Abigail stood, watching the proceedings with tired eyes. "Been quiet," he acknowledged. "Might be changing now." After the sheriff and his men departed, Jack and Abigail stood in silence, surveying the damage to the cabin. Half the roof was gone, and the west wall would need rebuilding, but the structure itself was sound. Like its owner, it had endured. "I should go," Abigail said finally. "I've brought enough trouble to your door." Jack studied her face, so like Emily's, yet marked by a harder life, by choices his wife had never had to make. "Silas said something before he died," Jack said, "about Tom Wilkes, about you knowing he was my friend." Abigail's expression shuddered. "Silas said a lot of things, most of them lies." "Was that a lie?" She held his gaze for a long moment, then sighed. "No, I knew Tom was your friend. Emily mentioned him in her letters. When I found out he was the marshal in Silver Creek, I sought him out, told him who I was, what I was doing." Her voice grew stronger. "We worked together for months tracking Silas and his gang. He was a good man, Jack. The best. He died because I wasn't fast enough with my warning. Not a day goes by that I don't carry that weight." Jack nodded slowly, seeing the truth in her eyes. "We all have ghosts, Abigail. Things we're running from. Things we're trying to set right." He gestured toward a small fenced area beneath a cottonwood tree where a simple wooden cross stood. "Would you like to see her properly this time?" Tears welled in Abigail's eyes as she nodded. They walked together to Emily's grave, the morning sun warm on their shoulders. Abigail knelt in the grass and placed the silver locket on the fresh-turned earth, whispering words too soft for Jack to hear. When she stood, she looked like Emily in the morning light, but her smile was her own. "I'll stay through winter," she said, "if you'll have me. Help you repair the house, tend the grave." She glanced toward the cabin, then back to Jack. "Emily wouldn't want either of us to be alone." Jack nodded, throat tight with gratitude and grief, in something that might have been hope. Years later, when Abigail had become the school teacher in Silver Creek, and Jack had learned to smile again, people would still talk about the night the Redwood place burned but didn't fall, how a dead woman's sister had brought justice to killers and peace to a grieving widower. But Jack knew the truth was simpler than that. Sometimes the dead sent us what we needed most, not themselves, but the strength to keep living without them. And sometimes that was enough. Thank you for joining me for The Call from Darkness, another tale from the American frontier. If you enjoyed Jack and Abigail's story, please consider subscribing to this channel and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss our next Western adventure. Next week, we'll be heading to Montana Territory, where the remaining member of the Blackwell Gang seeks revenge on Jack and Abigail. It's a story of betrayal, justice, and the price of redemption in blood debts at dawn. This is Thomas Reynolds reminding you that the Old West may be gone, but its stories and the lessons they teach us about courage, honor, and standing your ground live on in each of us. Until next time, keep your powder dry and your stories true.